over these last 2.5 months. I can't believe it's only been 2.5 months. I've enjoyed learning what brings many of you here to UUSG and what keeps you here. And one of the stories that you've shared tells me so much about what this congregation is and what's important here. When the First Congregational Church of Geneva put out LGBTQ affirming banners in December of 2017, those banners were repeatedly vandalized. And then anti-LGBTQ protesters showed up on Sunday mornings handing out pamphlets and telling the worshipers on their way into church how they are wrong. It made it extremely uncomfortable for the members of that congregation to show up to their own worship. Someone at this congregation learned about this, and Reverend Lindsay Bates said, even from Sunday morning, from the pulpit in the middle of worship, that she encouraged whoever was willing to leave to go and be with that other congregation in front and create a walkway for members of that congregation to be able to enter their worship home unaccosted. There were several dozens more people affirming LGBTQ people at that point. And this action was described by attendees as a powerful display of community solidarity and support for inclusion. My friends, all I can say is, amen. Amen for a whole bunch of people here leaving this sanctuary to essentially accompany members of another church to be able to enter their worship space unencumbered. One significant role of the church, of our church, is to protect and support vulnerable people. So I want to talk about what it means to provide protection and resisting oppression towards vulnerable people in our society. It's a critical task for people of faith, but often an uncomfortable one, especially for people of privilege. Brené Brown says, to opt out of conversations about privilege and oppression because they make you uncomfortable is the epitome of privilege. She says, I've learned enough about privilege to know that we're at our most dangerous when we think we've learned everything we need to know about it. That's when you stop paying attention to injustice. And make no mistake, not paying attention because you're not the one getting harassed or fired or pulled over or underpaid is the definition of privilege. Audre Lorde, who described herself as a black lesbian mother, warrior, poet, she saw clearly how people who weren't in the dominant group would tend to give away their power by not speaking up. And she taught that we cannot be alive and our true selves unless we do the hard work of putting into language one's honest experience. She raged against white supremacy, against homophobia, against misogyny. She articulated the most compelling power analysis in her day. And she identified a mythical norm where power resides in our society. She said, in America, this mythical norm is usually defined as white, thin, male, young, heterosexual, Christian, and financially secure. I happen to fit every one of those categories, except that of Christian, and perhaps as young, but I'm in denial about that. So I'm going to claim that I'm young. But as a member of the clergy, along with those other categories, you are looking at a paragon of privilege. And this morning, there's something I've got to cop to. As a straight, white, financially secure male, it's easier for me. It's easier for me and for people like me to dance to the rhythms, the conventional rhythms of society. And for each degree of difference within a human being, there is the need to recognize one's own rhythm. And there is the need to come out or claim an identity. And as Audre Lorde recognized, we are not awake. And we cannot claim our power until recognizing our own rhythm and seeing how it complements and plays off and calls in others. And those of us who are paragons of privilege, and there's a number of us here, if we want to be fully alive and living in the light of truth, then we need to do that challenging work of recognizing where we inadvertently support the oppression of others. It means we have to do a lot of listening. And in my view, a central role of the congregation is to foster a community where each person can discern what is their true rhythm, who they are, to encourage us all to grow into who we are called to be. And another central role is to nourish those who participate on the front lines of culture change and social justice. It doesn't mean everyone is working on the front lines, but we're all doing things that make this a place that nourishes those who are doing that challenging work of literally standing in the gap between where the world is and where the world can be. So I've been wanting to talk about privilege today and the responsibility that this privilege brings, because Transgender Remembrance Day is November 19th, this week. And earlier this year, Trump signed an executive order revoking federal recognition of transgender and non-binary people. Our government, federal government, currently seeks to pretend there aren't transgender people and non-binary people in our midst. This encourages the persecution of our trans and queer siblings. As a UU congregation, may we say unequivocally, trans lives matter, and trans people belong. And may we not only say this, but may we strive to embody this on a daily basis.
Trans lives matter.
And last year, the common read for the Unitarian Universalist Association was Authentic Selves, celebrating trans and non-binary people and their families. And this year, the common read is Social Change Now, a guide for reflection and connection by Deepa Iyer. More will come about these, but there are two things that happened this past week that the Spirit tells me I must share with you. The first is that Illinois has become the 13th state to pass clean slate legislation. Why is this a big deal to me? 15 years ago, I was trained in faith-based organizing. At that training were the leaders of Ceasefire. If you know the movie, the documentary, The Interrupters, it's about these folks who've come out of prison. They've come out, they're folks who are devoting their lives to prevent revenge killings from happening and to bring down the temperature when violence erupts in the city of Chicago. Now, in this training, as I got to know them, I found it striking that there was one piece of legislation they really wanted to get passed. And they asked me and the folks from my congregation to join them on this. And it was to allow felons with people with nonviolent felonies on their record to be able to seal them. And back then, the compromise was 4 years after doing their time, because so many people have felonies for drug offenses. So many people have been forced into acknowledging yes, yes, so they wouldn't get prison time. And I said, sure. And so I, with 90 people of my then congregation, showed up to a church on the west side of Chicago. And we'd gotten Senator Don Harmon to go. He was not excited about coming. He actually was quite upset that a couple of us insisted that he be there, and that if he wasn't there, we'd acknowledge that he had declined to come. And he walked in, and he saw 90 of my people and 30 people from another congregation in Oak Park, and all of a sudden, he completely changed. He agreed to sponsor the legislation. He coached us on how to get others. And so 30 people showed up on a bus on a Tuesday, a work day, mostly retired folks, to drive down. We had to meet at 6 o'clock in the morning to get down to Springfield early enough. And 2 of the people in my former congregation, they got 2 Republicans that day to sign on. I mean, they had been Republicans themselves in the past. They knew how to talk Republican. Right? And I'm like, this isn't rocket science. Faith-based organizing can be powerful. And it wasn't long until that became law. 6 years later, that compromise of 4 years after doing their time, that got taken away. The only problem was it was a long and often expensive process to get one's felony sealed. It's not expunged, it's sealed. Law enforcement wants to make sure that, there's the history there, but it's not going to prevent you from getting all of the benefits that everyone else gets. Because once you get a felony on your record, you essentially become a second-class citizen. And I worked for a year with Live Free Illinois, addressing the intersection of criminal justice reform and public safety, specifically in Black communities. And clean slate was the #1 thing. And I'm so glad to say that Illinois has now become the 14th state to allow people who have nonviolent felonies on their records to be able to automatically seal them. And it's because we, at my former congregation, recognized, as people of privilege, we know how to work the system. And we know a lot. But we don't know what's really important to folks in historically marginalized communities. So all these Black churches, predominantly Black churches, were organizing, and we joined them to follow their lead. They set the agenda. We weren't in charge. We just came alongside them to be of support. And what did we get? We grew tremendously by learning their experience and understanding how they engage and navigate really challenging communities. And these Black pastors, they're dealing with untenable issues in their community. And so for me, it transformed my ministry and my understanding of what faith-based organizing can be about. The other thing I want to share with you is something that happened a week ago Saturday. It was 8:30 in the morning. I was walking my dog. I have a golden doodle named Haley. And Haley and I were coming back from our 15-minute walk, and we're about a block away from our house, literally, less than 100 yards from my house. And we're just walking, and I'm the only one out there. It's a really cold day. You know, last week when it was a lot colder than this one. And we just walk. There's 2 ICE vehicles, 8 agents with covered faces, 4 of them with their hands on a pretty big, what looked like to me, Mexican man, dressed in white, who had clearly shown up to work on my neighbor's deck, a neighbor who shares an alley with me. I wish I could say I flipped out my phone and started taking photos and video. Fear flooded my nervous system. I was the only one out there. This came up completely unexpected. Only later did I learn that the day before, 14 Oak Park moms had showed up to the Broadview Detention Center, jumped the barrier, and intentionally got arrested to make a public statement about their values being completely different than how people are being treated in our wider community. And there were at least eight incidents where people were literally dragged off the street or out of homes in Oak Park on that day. And I don't have anything to worry about. I'm a paragon of privilege. But in that moment, I experienced the fear that I imagine people who are much more vulnerable than me experience likely on a regular basis, especially if they're undocumented. or if they're transgender and happen to be going through a certain place that's unknown to them, or other people that are especially vulnerable. But there was what I did. I rationalized at that moment, there's a sign with a phone number 40 yards away. I'm going to go there, take a photo of the sign, and call that number, and walk back, which is what I did. And by the time I got back, the two SUVs, which did have license plates, were gone. But there was a dilapidated white van with some chalk numbers written on the back of one of the mirrors, and I shared with the man at Casa all of this, and then I noticed someone was in the van. Someone was hiding in the van, and I could let the people at Casa know. And they said, okay, so glad to know this will be a priority for us to respond to. Our identities are shaped by what is going on in the world and how we respond. And as a Unitarian Universalist, I have long sought to place my trust not in short-term political outcomes, but in the institutions of our democracy. I believe in community organizing. And as we witness one act of blatant white male supremacy after another, on a national scale often, as we watch the government act as if they can erase the identities of our trans and non-binary brothers, sisters, and siblings, as we watch privileged people using force and coercion to get their way, my friends, we have reached a very scary moment in American history. I attended Starr King School for the Ministry in Berkeley, California, where Sean Parker Dennison entered my second year. Sean became the first openly transgender minister to serve a congregation in this country. And now Sean didn't arrive to seminary as a man. He arrived as Shauna, who was a wonderful poet. And I and my fellow seminarians had the privilege of witnessing her transition to becoming a man. I'd like to share one of his poems. How to Survive an Apocalypse. First, learn to listen, not only for enemies around corners and hidden places, but for the faint footsteps of hope and the whisper of resistance. Hone your skills, aim your heart toward kindness, and stockpile second chances. Under the weight of destruction, we will need the strong shelter of forgiveness and the deeper wells that give the sweet water of welcome. We have a place for you. When the world ends, we must not add destruction to destruction, not accept a beggar's bargain to fight death with more death. In order to survive the apocalypse, any apocalypse at all, we have to give up the counterfeit currency of self-sufficiency, the mistaken addiction to competition, the lie that the last to die has somehow survived. What can we do in these challenging times? First, learn to listen. listening to the stories, and often deeply painful stories, from women, from racial minorities, of gay and lesbian people, of transgender people. All these people have opened my consciousness and shaped my identity as an ally. And as an ally, it's my work to calling upon people like me, privileged folks, to wake up to the racism in our midst, to call upon others to wake up to the violence and oppression against women, to call upon heterosexuals to wake up to the pain and beauty that comes with claiming one's own identity as a sexual minority. And today, if you feel so moved to join the protest of the Unitarian Universalist Advocacy Network in Illinois and many other organizations, come join our people in Elgin. I'll be there, but a little late, because first I have a Meet the Minister gathering to hear more stories of folks here. May our stories and sharing transform us all. Blessed be. Amen.
Visit us at uusg.org.